welcome back into the Ask the Masters podcast. And this week we're going to kind of go back into the archives. We know quite a few of you guys are new listeners, and we've got some really, really good episodes that we recorded early on. And I'm really excited to bring back some of these episodes over the next couple of weeks here as we round down 2020. And then we've got a lot of great content coming up for 2021. We've got two more of our deep dive podcasts that we have already recording that are currently being that are being edited. And so, but really right here at the end, we wanted to reintroduce some of the podcasts that were kind of the best of over the past couple of years. And so today we'll be jumping in and revisiting the episode on ozone that I recorded with Dave Rockwell. And so many of you have listened over the last couple of years. You're going to be familiar with Kevin Kobabe, who's joining me. And Kevin and I are going to be kind of co-hosting, and we're going to try this new format out, and definitely in the comments below here, let us know what you think about it. But we wanted to kind of try just a different format here, where we'll have a little bit of an informal time here at the beginning, and then we'll launch right into the episode. So welcome in, Kevin, and you don't really need an introduction, but say hi to everybody.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Yeah, this was actually, even though it was one of the earlier episodes, it really ozone is something that has been intriguing me for the last handful of years for sure, where I've been trying to get it more and more into all of my builds that I do. So and Dave Rockwell is definitely a huge authority on the subject, and has done so much research and to help me understand. And I think listening to this again, it's just I still learn something new every time I listen to these things, even multiple times.
Yeah, that was intriguing to me this morning as well. Both you and I listened to it this morning just to kind of refamiliarize ourselves with the episode. And yeah, I picked up something this morning as well. So there is just so much information that Dave and I dove into here. Yes. I know you're doing quite a bit of ozone on your pools. Both you and I have the joy of having clients with the bandwidth to do large ozone systems. Right. So it's a lot of fun. But I think as an industry, it's really important to learn about the technology and to really understand it. And that's really what we tried to do in this episode, is kind of dispel some of the myths and kind of give everybody a broad understanding of ozone.
Yes, and I believe the technology has come a long way from probably the first time I was introduced to ozone was easily 25 years ago, and it was just really kind of new to everybody back then. And nowadays the systems that they have available are just so much better than what we had 25 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. And even since this was recorded a couple years ago, we're starting to explore kind of the next level of the maturation of ozone, and starting to get into the nanobubble technology and ways that we can kind of expand the life expectancy of ozone. As we talk about in this episode, ozone off gases very quickly. And so with the newer nanobubble technology, we're actually able to keep it in the water even more and make it more viable for regular jobs.
Right. And the more that everybody knows about it, the bigger it's going to become. It's I believe it's the next up and coming big thing that's going to replace salt systems across the country, hopefully. So.
Yep. All right. So we are happy to have you as part of Ask the Masters. If I could just do a quick ask, if you guys could like and subscribe this and share it to all of your friends, we would much appreciate that, because our goal here is not to become rich and famous by any means. Nobody's making money off of this endeavor, but our goal here is really the enrichment of the entire industry. And so the more that you like and subscribe and share these episodes, the broader the reach is, and the more people that will be able to find us. So stay tuned. We've got a great episode here, and I'm glad you guys have joined us. And even if you've listened to this one before, please, by all means, listen to it again, because both Kevin and I picked up something new even after listening to it again. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the show today. My name is Dave Penton from Fluid Dynamics Pool and Spa, and today I have the honor of interviewing a good friend of mine, a guy who I consider the preeminent ozone expert in the country, Dave Rockwell. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
So tell us who you are, what's your little bit about your company, and I don't even know what to ask because we talk on the phone so often that it's right. So introduce yourself to the listeners.
I'm a pool guy. I've started servicing pools 30 years ago, and early on in my career, I came across a pool. I started it up, and it had a ClearWater Tech Ozone system on it. And as I serviced this pool, I recognized that it used so little chlorine. It would run on a half a tab of chlorine a week, and rarely had to shock it. The water was brilliantly clear, more so than the other pools I was servicing. And so as I got involved with this pool, I just became intrigued. I'm like, I got to learn more about this. This is really something. And so I contacted ClearWater. I went up, and they had a class on ozone and how to work on it, and they set me up with some materials and things that I could study and learn about ozone, and it kind of started a love affair that I've had my whole career in pools.
And that goes back how many years now?
20 to 25 years.
Wow. So even back then, I mean, ozone is to an extent, it's starting to finally come of age in the broad industry. But, 25 years ago, you were already dabbling in this and seeing it. And so let me take you back even a little bit further than that to start off. How, did you wake up when you were 13 and go, I'm going to be a pool guy? How did you end up in this industry, and where are you from?
I grew up in Michigan.
Pool-rich Michigan.
Yeah, that was I ended up here just kind of by twists of fate. I spent some time in Colorado. I kind of lived my life backwards. I did my retirement years in my 30s while I was a ski bum in Colorado, and moved to California, and I was kind of knocking around, couldn't really find a job that fit, and a friend of mine was a pool guy, and he's like, well, why don't you just ride along with me for a while? I was hooked. You're just outdoors in the sun, beautiful backyards. I'm like, this is it for me. This is what I want to do.
You were hooked immediately, but how did that progress into becoming where you are today?
The difficulty. He only had a one pool route, and but he had other friends, and everybody had a couple little extra pools that they didn't want to do that they gave me. I started doing those. I found some pools that I was able to work off. Some apartment pools, commercial pools, which really got me up to speed in a hurry on how to do repairs. You don't have a choice.
Right.
And so I did that. I was fortunate enough to meet some automation specialists. I got involved with doing in the old Compool days. Worked with those people. Tom Shandians was a huge mentor. He was a great guy to work with. And so that kind of opened doors for me to get into the higher end market, and that's where I came across my first ozone system. And like I said, it just sort of went from there.
Yeah, so even at that young stage of your career within pools, you were already starting to experiment with the kind of the cutting edge stuff. 25 years ago, automation was nothing. Now,
Right.
now we don't even think about it. I mean,
Yeah.
most pools, at least out here in California, get built that way. But 25 years ago, that was not the case.
After I saw my first automation system, it's like every pool needs this.
Yeah.
And it kind of was the same way with an ozone system. More pools need this. And the variable speed pumps came out. As soon as I saw that, I got right on board with it. You just see the advantages of newer technology and start using it, and it becomes very much like, why didn't we always do it this way?
Sure. That was, you've been in the industry longer than I have, but that was the first kind of monumental breakthrough that I remember in my career. I still am always perplexed by the people outside of California that really push back on it. I don't understand that.
That in this day and age, that it's been this far down the road and that's still happening just blows my mind. And I guess that's the one takeaway as a pool guy that has always kind of alarmed me about my industry, my end of the industry, is how so many of us are closed-minded when it comes to these new opportunities. Nobody's going to pay that much money to automate a pool. Nobody's going to pay $1,500 for a pool pump. Same thing with ozone systems now. Nobody's going to pay that much for an ozone system. Stop making those decisions for your customers.
Exactly.
They want this stuff, especially now in the millennial market. They're very tech savvy. They're very health conscious. They want this stuff, and we've got to know, because it's the right thing to do for one thing, but it's the best thing for us too, for our business.
Sure, exactly. And as everybody gets more environmentally conscious and more health conscious, and this whole health and wellness movement, that has been a part of European
Right.
living for so long, as that kind of grows over here and matures over here, the opportunity for a product like ozone is just,
Absolutely.
I mean, we're just starting to see the beginning
Yes.
of that. Can you share a little bit about, what are some of the benefits? Why would somebody put ozone on a pool? Chlorine is cheap, it's economical, it's easy to use.
That's true, 100% true. And a lot of times you think, if you're trying to promote alternative sanitizers,
Which means salt to most of the industry.
But when we're talking about alternative sanitizers, we're not necessarily saying that chlorine itself is the devil, that it's a horrible thing. Chlorine is a very effective sanitizer, but it's all about the way that it's dosed, the amount that's used, how do we control the byproducts. Although chlorine is ubiquitous and cheap, it's not the be-all and end-all. The argument against ozone is always, well, it can't be a primary sanitizer, it can't be a standalone sanitizer. Well, nobody stops and applies those same standards to a chlorine pool. When you go to any hotel on a busy Saturday afternoon, I can't tell you how many times I turn my kids around and say, sorry, we're going to find something else to do. We're not going in that
cesspool.
Toilet.
Yes.
I've been to pools where you can't see a person's feet when they're waist deep in the water. Chlorine is not necessarily in and of itself a standalone sanitizer either.
Right. That's a great point that I never really thought about. You get these heavy load environments. So how does ozone solve that problem? Eliminate chlorine and just stick an ozone system on there?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And in a commercial world, you can't do it. Legally, you can't do it.
But I think you're saying also that you shouldn't.
True. Yeah. You need enough of a residual for the bather-to-bather contact, the wastes that come off of each bather. But when you add chlorine to a pool, the first thing the chlorine has to do is oxidize what's already accumulated in the water. When you use ozone and chlorine together, the ozone takes all the heavy lifting off of the chlorine.
How so?
There's no built up organic load in the water.
Okay.
So you can have a smaller amount of chlorine to do the job of just acting as a residual to cover that bather to bather contact. The other advantage of chlorine and ozone together, like in a spa environment we were talking, especially this would be true, the kind of nitrogen and ammonia based compounds, sweat, urine, snot,
Chloramine forming
yes,
elements within the water.
both chlorine and ozone are very slow to react individually to those things. But in an environment where you're using both, the chlorine oxidizes these compounds down into something that the ozone can burn right off. So you never get that accumulation of chlorine byproducts and the foul smell and the foam. And this is the amount of residual you need, or whether you need a residual, has a lot to do with your bather loads and the organic load that comes into a pool.
By
But-
organics, you mean dust, mold, pollen spores. It doesn't necessarily need to be at a gym. This could be in a backyard
Foliage
pool.
debris, yes, exactly. And so, if it's just one person doing laps in a residential pool, you don't need a really high level of residual, but you need a little something in the water just to kill things that blow in. Now, it's true ozone does burn off and it doesn't necessarily create a residual that lasts, but ozone does last in the water for anywhere from 20 minutes to a matter of an hour or more after you turn the pump off, after you stop generating ozone. Chlorine will last obviously longer, but as long as that pump is running, although it's not necessarily creating what you'd think of as a residual in the same way as chlorine, you're always replacing the ozone that off gases or gets used up. So although it's not a residual, there is a steady supply of ozone in the water, and it is measurable. Ozone, chlorine, bromine all show up on a DPD test kit.
So with the ozone systems, the residual is not long-lasting, and that's been another knock that I've heard about ozone's systems. In that is that, unless you're running it 24 hours a day, it's really ineffective. And you and I do a lot of ozone installations here in Southern California, and to an extent, there's some validity to that. It doesn't necessarily need to run 24 hours a day, but since ozone is not able to be stabilized, an hour after you turn off an ozone system, we've lost all that residual in the water. So how do you overcome some of those barriers with the system, and what are some of the things that you recommend as you're introducing an ozone system to a pool?
Well, when people are swimming every day, there's absolutely no reason not to run a pool 24 hours. It's the best thing for the water. It's not only is the ozone cleaning the water or sanitizing the water, but the water's getting filtered, the water's circulating. Circulating the water is the best thing you can do for its health. So there's nothing bad about running it 24 hours a day.
This is where we have really seen the benefit of variable speed pumps.
Yep.
Because in the past, the idea, especially here in Southern California where we have really high electric rates, the idea of running a pool pump 24 hours is unheard of. And so I know you're going to get some pushback on that because, the pump is loud and everything, and who wants to hear that? But I really believe that ozone and variable speed pump technology have really allowed this to become a reality where you can run it, your system at a very low speed and run it 24 hours a day, or 22 or whatever, and you're not killing your neighbors with noise pollution, and you're also not killing your electric bill either.
Ozone is for people who value healthy water. My website is called swimchlorinefree.com. It doesn't say there's no chlorine ever in your pool.com. What we're trying to do is minimize the amount of chlorine, eliminate any chlorine byproducts, And for the most part, we're trying to give people a chlorine-free swimming experience.
I'm glad you explained that, because that could be misconceived.
And so that brings up another thing that I think we do a little different on the pools we do together. On the service end of things, we run no cyanuric acid, no conditioner in these pools. I don't want the chlorine to hang around. I don't want it to last. I want it to be full strength, do its thing, and be out of there.
And that just freaks people out, because they,
It does.
The big test case. So just to explain to the listeners a little bit, I'm a contractor. I build pools, and you do pretty much all of my startups, and you maintain these pools. And so we have a long-term history together, but then we also have learned how to develop these and watch them. It's not just something that I
Right.
put in.
So it had 15-gallon tanks, and
That was your chem tanks down at the equipment pad.
exactly, sorry.
Okay.
And it was using, on average, 27 gallons of chlorine a week,
Wow.
because he was swimming a lot, he had it hot, and that's just what it took to keep the pool
And it's a big
nice.
pool.
Yeah, it's a huge pool. And at full perimeter overflow, about 100 feet of vanishing edge.
Actually, 220.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I knew that was a long trough I had to clean. So when we commissioned the ozone systems, it went from using 27 gallons a week on average to about 7 or 8 gallons.
Wow.
So
And water quality stayed the same. There's no...
water quality went through the roof. It was so much better.
Explain that. And so explain why, at 27 gallons a week, I mean, that's a lot of chlorine. And,
Right.
and I do want to reiterate, this is a huge residential pool. This
Yeah,
is not
it's a
your
monster.
average backyard pool. It's
It's the biggest residential pool I've ever worked on.
Yeah, it's a couple thousand square feet.
Yeah.
And so just to give perspective so people
Right.
don't, freak out. So, but essentially we reduce the chlorine usage by, what's that, 75%? But explain what happened to the water too. I mean, it was clear and it was beautiful and everything before the ozone, but what's the difference that you saw?
Ozone is the strongest oxidizer you can put in the water. It oxidizes metals and also coagulates or flocculates metals so that it can be filtered out more. So almost immediately the water clarity went way up. Because it's filtering out the metals and the things that create color in the water becomes a deeper blue, a prettier blue. The clarity and the color of the water is with ozone is something you just can't match any other way.
Hey, Paula, this is Chris Ryan with ClearWater Tech. I just wanted to touch base with you. I understand you guys are using a number of our systems, and you might have some questions. Yeah, I'm glad that you called me, because I've got a question. We have a couple of units that are starting to age a little bit and getting beyond their lifespan, and I was wondering two questions. One is, how do I know that the unit is getting to the end of its lifespan? Is there a particular number of hours that the unit is maxed out at? And then what can I do to restore or recondition the unit? That's a great question. Our units are very robust and are designed for long-term usage, and most people don't realize that they run 20 or 24 hours a day in most cases, and there is some wear and tear on the unit itself. The glass dielectrics need to be cleaned, seals need to be replaced, and things like that. And over time, the ozone output can diminish slightly, and you'll notice an impact on the water quality is probably the easiest way to determine. But the wonderful thing is, if you take the unit, box it up, and ship it back to us for a nominal fee, we'll refurbish it, bring it back to new standards, and ship it back to you for reinstallation. So there's a service that we offer that does exactly that a lot of our dealers like to take advantage of. Oh, awesome! And I've had a ClearWater Tech system on my pool now for 7 years. I'm sure it's probably about time to box it up and send it in, have it reconditioned also. But I've seen a dramatic improvement in the clarity of the water, and not only from a reduction in the oil from the suntan lotion that my kids and spouse put in the water, but the water just seems so much clearer, almost as if we've got micro filtering going on, or some type of flocculant occurring where it's able to just capture all those little suspended particles.
You're right on the money. The term we use is called microflocculation. What it does is it causes all the little particles, once they're broken down by the ozone, the ozone gas in the water, that the particles come together. They coalesce and form larger particles and are picked up through filtration. So it really enhances your filtration system so that you get the cleanest, clearest, brightest water that you could possibly get out of a swimming pool using a ClearWater Tech Ozone system.
I want to thanks for your follow-up call. I know we haven't met in person, and it's nice actually touching base with somebody other than engineers at the factory.
Well, Paulo, like I said, your reputation precedes you, and I know you built some of the finest pools in Northern California and all over the globe, really. But, I look forward to the opportunity where we can sit down and share a glass of wine and talk about new ideas for the future as well.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks for the call.
Thank you, Paulo.
A huge advantage to ozone is the fact that it gets rid of things in the water that no other, either chlorine or other alternative sanitizers, they don't touch. When you look at these beautiful backyards we work in, they get that way because they have gardeners using fertilizers, herbicides. They have a guy come and spray for bugs. Once or twice, I've had them come and spray right up next to me. They've got a full-on suit and respirator on, and they're spraying that stuff around me. And I'm like, wait a minute.
And it's atomizing through the atmosphere, and the water captures all of that.
It's getting into the pool. All the stuff, and their neighbors are doing the same thing. All this is blowing around, getting into the pool. So there's a toxic load that we can't measure for and we don't see that ozone gets rid of. A very interesting survey that was published. They asked people what was their dominant memory of summertime.
Oh.
One of the top responses was the smell of chlorine in the pool.
Frightening, isn't it?
Most people's dominant memory is an unsafe, unhealthy swimming pool that they were in, and they didn't even know it.
Explain why smelling chlorine is such a problem.
Well, basically, there's two reasons that you smell chlorine. The dull, funky chlorine smell that you associate with pools most often is actually from the chlorine byproducts. It's the stuff that we talked about that creates foam and spas. That's an extreme concentration of it, but it's basically the chlorine and the things that it's reacted with have created chloramines. Chloramines, if they're allowed to stay in the water, degrade in levels to more and more toxic versions of themselves. So that's the one chlorine smell. Now there's another chlorine smell that's really bad, and that's a stinging. It kind of burns your eyes and burns the hair out of your nose. And that's when you get super high concentrations of free chlorine, 10 parts per million and above. Both of those are equally harmful, but if you smell chlorine in the water, you really should get a test strip or a test kit before you get in.
So I think that's a big misconception, among people that don't understand chlorine. The fact that you can walk into your local YMCA, and I've heard this said before, people will walk in and say, I can't smell chlorine, there must be a problem. Yeah. And that's actually 1,000% the opposite of what reality is. And so you're saying that if you walk into a place and smell chlorine, your radar should go up and you should be really wondering what's going on.
Yep, exactly.
talk me through your beliefs on chemical automation and being able to control those feeds.
Ozone doesn't fit into every budget, but for a little bit more than the price of a salt system, a chemical automation system can be added to a pool that controls the pH. It gives you a real-time reading of the quality of the water. What we do with our chemical automation systems on a residential pool is, again, we run no cyanuric acid. Some guys like to run 20 to 30 parts per million. If you do any more than that, you're actually at cross purposes of what you're trying to accomplish. But by dosing at regular intervals and keeping your residual chlorine down to a part per million or less, half a part per million of active chlorine in the water will do everything you need it to do. So you don't need these massively high chlorine residual numbers with a chemical automation system, because it's constantly replenishing the supply as it gets used up. That in itself creates fewer chlorine byproducts, and the net result is you don't see, feel, taste chlorine and smell chlorine in the water.
So I really want to bring back around something we touched on earlier about this whole health and wellness movement. I've talked about it on other episodes with other people. We're really starting to see the home wellness center coming of age, especially super high-end residential, where you've got the wellness center in the basement, where you've got your gym, you've got your massage table, maybe a spa, a sauna. And so as that trickles down out of just the high end, it's I think we're going to see that really mature, and it's just a kind of an outgrowth of where I see just society moving right now. Millennials are very, very health conscious, and
Yes.
wellness is really, it's potentially a new frontier, if you will. And we've seen it the last number of years with the onset of hybrid cars. We live in California here, and electric cars are going to be, they may not trickle out to the rest of the nation as much as they will here, but that technology is creeping in everywhere, and
Yes.
you have hybrid cars that almost, I can't think of any of the major manufacturers that don't have some sort of a hybrid version of at least some of their more popular cars. And it's all kind of that same environmentally conscientious client base and consumer base. And so how do you see ozone, fitting in with this whole health and wellness movement?
Well, I think that's what's starting to take ozone out of the lifestyles of the rich and famous world and bringing it down into the traditional backyard market, because of who's buying and owning these pools now. Like you said, they drive hybrids. They're very environmentally conscious. They're health conscious. They spend more money for organic fruits and vegetables. They buy grass-fed, grass-finished meats, organic chicken, that sort of thing. They go to chiropractors, naturopaths, instead of regular allopathic doctors. So they're used to spending money on their health. And so just like we talked about automation, variable speed pumps, these things worked their way into that market. They were a higher cost than what the average backyard pool used to be, but these people see the value in that. They care for their health. They, especially children nowadays, there's high incidence of autism, food allergies, things like that, and they're concerned that chlorine is contributing to that toxic load. So things that we can do to reduce that in a pool, we're giving them exactly what they want.
Sure. I mean, the marketplace seems to be so ripe for this right now. And just like a hybrid car, it costs a little bit more. But you look around, as you're on the roads, there's an awful lot of people who are very willing to spend a little bit more for a hybrid car.
That's
and
right.
so, the so much of the pushback within the industry is I really want to kind of talk against that a little bit because, I like what you had mentioned in a conversation you and I had offline here is that, the you're making the decision for the client,
Right.
and that's in some respects I feel that's irresponsible for your client, but then at the end of the day, I think you can navigate the conversation and explain the health and wellness benefits of what an ozone system does and offers, and it's not smoke and mirrors.
It's not.
It is a legitimate alternative, not an alternative. It's a legitimate supplement, and it's a potential to not only create a better environment for the client, but to also help them with their increased need for health and wellness, and the benefits to it are there as well.
And there's environmental benefits also. Every gallon of chlorine that you add to a pool, you're putting about 4 pounds of salt into it. Every gallon of acid is about 2 pounds. So you're driving the total dissolved solids, the dissolved metals and things in the water. Eventually that water has to be drained. Now, up until this winter in Southern California, we've had a pretty bad drought situation. So people have been reluctant to drain their pools, so they've had to live with declining water quality month by month and year by year. Ozone systems, by limiting the amount of things you're adding to the pool, it is an environmentally and responsible thing to do, to have an ozone pool.
Sure, and ozone does not leave any residual. It off gases out.
Carbon and water is
And
what it leaves behind.
the other thing that that I have always touched on too, nobody talks about the environmental impact of what does it look like to manufacture the chlorine, and then it has to go into a semi truck and get delivered to the distribution house, and then you put it in the back of your truck, and it's heavy, and you use more fuel and everything. So if you really start to look broadly outside of just the actual dumping it into the pool, the impacts are pretty far-reaching, and to be able to minimize that, it's a real easy sell. Once you can start to talk to your clients and that it's not as difficult a sale as you would think.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, and just the fact that I think so many people would be willing to spend a little bit of extra money.
Right.
One of the pushbacks over the years has been ease of operation and all of that, and so walk us through that. I mean, you have dozens, if not hundreds, of these out in the field. Right. What does normal operation look like, and can you dispel some of those myths?
Well, there's a couple little things that need to be checked monthly. Things like little fan filters that keep the unit cool. There's a set of gauges on the front. There's a vacuum gauge and a flow gauge, and making sure that those numbers are adding up, or they're in the right range, so that you're drawing the ozone into the water and mixing it properly. It's really just a matter of knowing what to look for. And for my part of it, I either maintain the ozone pools, our company does it ourselves, or if I'm working with a pool guy, I'll spend some time and train him what to look for. And then annually, the units do need to be serviced. The chambers need to be rebuilt. As we mentioned at one point, there's very high voltage going through these things. There's a lot that creates heat, and so there's a certain amount of service that it requires every year. It's probably a few $100s. But as long as it's kept up and kept running, it's very, very easy. And as I mentioned, the whole reason I got into looking into ozone in the first place was because how much easier it made my life as a pool guy.
Sure, and it's not unlike maintaining your salt cell.
Right.
Those have to be cleaned on a fairly regular basis,
Right.
and anymore it seems like every couple of years you're having to buy a new one.
Yep.
And so it's the biggest thing that we've seen over the years is how many times have you walked into a project and the ozone system has been shut down.
Right.
And really it's
Makes me want
because
to cry every time I see that.
exactly. But the reality is that it probably hadn't been serviced in 4
Right.
years, and yeah, if they're not maintained, but it's just like anything. If you don't change the oil in your car, guess what? It's going to blow up eventually. And
Right.
so, just learning that really it's about a year, and yeah, there's a maintenance interval that people are unaware of, but it's not the end of the world. So you and I have the benefit of working on, true high-end residential.
Right.
How do you see this as being able to come down into the more traditional residential market? Because that's been one of the things that we've seen over the years. Is this is really, ozone is a very integral part, and it's almost, at least here in Southern California, getting to be an expected part of true high-end residential construction. Right. But it's not just for that. I mean, it's definitely, we've done a few systems on, more traditional pools,
Right.
Regular middle-class neighborhoods,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not this big luxury item that somebody is splurging on. It really is a viable, in more of a mainstream type of an environment. Explain that.
Well, the customers in that part of the market that I'm finding generally are the kind of people who do their own research online. They start looking at what's out there, and that's why I'm putting my website together, swimchlorinefree.com. I want to be a resource for people to be able to get actual, not just sales pitches, but real information about ozone and alternative sanitizers, how to make an intelligent choice between the options that are out there, and basically a little bit about the science behind ozone and the huge benefits it brings to a pool.
Yeah, just bring everybody back up to speed on that. What are the benefits for those that don't know, that are not familiar with ozone?
Ozone is, as an oxidizer, is around 100 times stronger than chlorine.
Wow.
Give or take, based on concentrations and so forth. And 3,000 times, up to 3,000 times faster working. So viruses and bacteria, many of them are killed on contact by ozone, where it takes chlorine sometimes minutes or even hours. The really bad bugs, the spores like Cryptosporidium, E. coli, they actually have a hard shell around the outside that has to be penetrated before you can actually get to the organism. Ozone kills those very rapidly. Chlorine, it takes some time to break it down. There are other systems like ion systems that use metals, copper, silver, zinc, and those systems take hours or even days to kill a bug. So basically, they might be kind of a feel-good thing to put on your pool. I don't use chlorine, I use this. What you have to realize is the stuff that it's killing is the stuff you left in the water days ago. There is nothing there protecting you right now against bather-to-bather transmissions.
We're talking alternative sanitizers right now and alternative systems. I want to just touch on AOP just a little bit. I don't want to get too granular into it, but it seems to be the new kind of buzzword within the industry, and it's essentially UV combined with ozone. Can you just touch a little bit on that? And
they're creating ozone and then destroying it with UV. In that process, hydroxyl radicals are created. They're something that appear in a flash and disappear. I don't know that there's any way to measure them or measure for them, because it's just a quick little thing that happens in the piping. And so there is some promise in that. It's something that we've been playing around with, using UV systems on our ozone pools. But I'm not entirely convinced that destroying the ozone and not letting a little bit of residual go back to the pool is such a great thing, because ozone has so many beneficial qualities to it. For me, the jury's still out.
Sure.
But the thing I will say is that most of the units that are out there for residential pools, compared to what we do, are drastically undersized. It's like that old ozone light bulb in a box system. Does ozone work even in small quantities? Yeah. But if you don't use enough of it, you're not really getting the full benefit that you really are looking for in a pool.
Sure. And the systems that we put in, yeah, they're a little bit more expensive than your traditional bolt-on system that you can go buy at the distribution house. But we are seeing real
Real
world
results in the water.
Yeah, and real world reductions of chemicals,
Yep.
90-95%. I mean,
Yes.
we can really cut it out.
Yeah.
So
And in the wintertime, I've got most of my ozone pools run chlorine free. They're running just on ozone.
So as the resident ozone expert, what is your what's the one thing, your takeaway for the listeners? What's the one thing that you want to, any myth you want to dispel, anything that you want to leave everybody with? Why ozone?
Because it can do so much for your pool in terms of the actual health of the water and the benefits to the water clarity, the water purity. A lot of people spend a lot of money on high-end finishes for their pool. You really want to show that off, put an ozone system on it. It's the water color and clarity, beauty is unmatched by any other process. If you want really, really healthy water, we've always looked at in the pool service industry, we've always looked at water quality in terms of what we're taking out of the water, all the harmful things that we're removing from the water, either by chemical treatment or filtration. For the first time with ozone, we're actually looking at adding something healthy to the water. We're dissolving oxygen and adding that to the water. Just being in that water is good for you. Your skin likes having that oxygen, and so to me, there's really nothing that approaches healthy water that you can get with ozone.
Sure, and it's we've been talking about it all throughout. The health and wellness aspects are just they're such a part of what everybody is looking for these days,
Right.
and being able to give them a product and just educating yourself enough to understand, how that fits in there. It's a much easier sell than I think a lot of people realize.
Yeah, getting to know your customer. If you see those Priuses and Teslas in the driveway, and if you see Whole Foods bags in the trash, you've got a potential for someone who would be interested in at least cutting back on the amount of chlorine they're exposing themselves to.
All right. Well, thank you very much again. What's your website?
SwimChlorineFree.com.
And on there, you are going to have what kind of information we find when we go there?
Well, I'm going to have information of some of the benefits and some things about ozone that people might want to know. I'll have some pictures of our pools and our applications. We'll talk a little bit about the properties of ozone and what it can do for you, and hopefully not just a sales tool, but an actual learning experience for people.
Yeah, it's not just come see my my website. I know you, and I know you, professionally, and I know that that's your goal is to become, not only the expert, but to give out information, and
Right.
and that information is going to be relevant to everybody across the country. So thanks for joining us today. I really have enjoyed
It's been a pleasure.
this.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, and we will catch you next time.